When Vice President JD Vance unexpectedly walked into a Minneapolis courthouse, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar thought she held all the cards until he opened a small leather notebook that would change everything. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar walked into the federal courthouse in Minneapolis that morning, expecting an affetee-too easy day. It was her city, her district, her people. The hearing was about financial misconduct in her community, and she had spent 6 years in Congress learning exactly how to turn questions like that into accusations of bias. What she did not expect was the man sitting in the front row of the gallery, Vice President JD. Vance was not on the witness list. He was not on the schedule. Nobody had announced he was coming. He sat in a dark gray suit with a small leather notebook open on his lap, a pen in his hand, and his eyes fixed on the witness table. He did not speak to anyone. He did not move. Omar saw him from across the room. She leaned over to her chief of staff and whispered something. The chief of staff covered his mouth and smiled. The chairman gavelled the hearing into session and recognized the congresswoman from Minnesota for an opening statement. Ilhan Omar stood up. She did not begin with the financial controversy. She began with the man in the front row. Mr. Chairman, before I begin my prepared remarks, I would like to address the elephant in this room. She did not look at Vance. She gestured toward him with the back of her hand, the way you would shoo a fly off a plate. The Vice President of the United States has decided, without invitation and without notice, to attend a congressional field hearing in my district. He sits there with his little leather book like a colonial administrator come to inspect the locals, and we are all supposed to be flattered. 2 Democratic staffers laughed. 3 more in the gallery clapped softly. So, before I talk about the alleged discrepancies my Republican colleagues claim to care so deeply about, though I notice they only care about discrepancies when the alleged individuals have brown skin, I want to say a few things about Mr. Vance because the American people deserve to know who is sitting in front of them. She turned. Now she faced him directly. This man wrote a book mocking the poor white people of Appalachia. He sold that book to Hollywood. He made millions of dollars off of his own community's pain, and then he turned around and joined the same Wall Street class that harmed Middletown, Ohio in the first place. He is a hillbilly in name only. He is a Yale law graduate pretending to wear work boots. The veterans in the gallery were starting to stiffen. He served in the Marine Corps, yes, as a public affairs officer. Let us be very clear about what that means. He wrote press releases. He took photographs. He never carried a rifle into combat. He served in an oil conflict that claimed the lives of more than 1 million Iraqis. And he came home and wrote a memoir that conveniently forgot to mention any of them. He is not a soldier, Mr. Chairman. He is a propagandist with a uniform in his closet. A man in the 3rd row, older, gray hair, an Army veteran S-pin on his lapel, actually rose halfway out of his seat before his wife pulled him back down. Omar wasn't finished. She was just getting started. And while we are talking about conflicts, let us talk about the way Republicans in this country have used one September morning 25 years ago to justify 2.5 decades of endless deployments, endless surveillance, endless attacks on Muslim Americans like me. 3,000 people lost their lives on September the 11th. Yes, that is a tragedy. She said the word tragedy, the way a person checks a box. But more than 1 million people perished in the conflicts that came after, and nobody in this room ever talks about their mothers. In the front row of the gallery, a woman in a denim jacket put her hand over her heart where a small gold star pin was fastened to the fabric. Her name was Patricia Donnelly. Her son had been a Marine. He had fallen in Helmand Province in 2011. She did not say a word, but her hand was shaking. Omar kept going. And the people Mr. Vance came to Minneapolis to protect today are not the hungry children of this district. They are the donors who fund a foreign military that strikes children in Gaza. They are the same lobby that has bought half of this Congress with their Benjamins. I voted against funding the Iron Dome, and I would do it again tomorrow. I will not vote to send American taxpayer dollars to defend a highly contentious state while children in my district go hungry. She paused for breath. Her supporters in the gallery were nodding. The forgotten Americans Mr. Vance pretends to represent are not forgotten. They are comfortable. They sit in their suburbs and complain about immigrants while their police departments unjustly target black men in the streets of this city. George Floyd was unjustly taken 8 blocks from where we are sitting right now. Mr. Vance has not said his name once in this entire trip to my city. Not one time. Because the people Mr. Vance actually serves do not care about George Floyd. They care about their property values. In the witness chair, she straightened her shoulders. She looked directly into the camera mounted on the press riser. Her voice dropped into the cadence of a closing argument. I came to this country as a refugee when I was 12 years old. I was given nothing. I built everything I have through my own work. And I want to say something today on the public record that the people watching this hearing need to hear me say very clearly. Beat. I owe this country nothing. The room went still. America did not save me. I saved myself. And I will not stand at this microphone and pretend gratitude for a country that put my people in cages, that struck my homeland, and that still treats women who look like me as suspects in our own land. She sat down. She gave a small, satisfied smile. The kind of smile you give when you have just landed a punch you have been planning for weeks. In the front row of the gallery, JD Vance had not moved. His pen was still resting on the open page of his notebook. His eyes had not left her face. He had not blinked. The only physical reaction his body had given, the only one, had come at the moment Omar said the word tragedy about September the 11th. His jaw had tightened once for a half-second, and then it had released. The chairman opened his mouth to recognize the vice president. Vance was already standing. He did not walk fast. He never walked fast. He walked the way a Marine walks on a familiar patrol, unhurried, deliberate, watching everything. He carried the leather notebook in his right hand, closed. He sat down at the witness table across from Ilhan Omar. He set the notebook down in front of him. He did not open it. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he began to speak. His voice was so quiet that the people in the back of the gallery had to lean forward to hear him. Madam Chair, members of the committee, Congresswoman Omar. Pause. I came to this room today to talk about $250 million that was taken from hungry children in this city. I have a notebook full of facts. I have witnesses. I have documents. I have everything I need to do my job today. He placed his hand on top of the notebook, flat palm down. But I am not going to open this notebook yet because the Congresswoman just said something that I cannot let stand on the record. And if I open this notebook before I address it, I will spend the rest of my life wishing I had said something. So I am going to say something. His eyes did not leave Omar's. Congresswoman, you stood at that microphone 2 minutes ago, and you talked about September the 11th. You said 3,000 people passing away was a tragedy. You said, and I quote, "Yes, that is a tragedy, like a person checking a box, like a person fulfilling an obligation before getting to the part of the speech they actually wanted to give." His voice did not rise. 3,000 Americans, ma'am, caught in the inferno, trapped under concrete, jumping out of 9 zero-story windows because the alternative was worse. Fathers calling their wives from hijacked planes to say goodbye to their children. Firefighters running into buildings that were collapsing while everyone else was running out. Office workers holding hands as they fell because they did not want to pass away alone. He paused for 1 full second. My generation watched it on television. I was 19 years old. I watched the second plane hit live in my mother's living room in Middletown, Ohio. And I made a decision that day. I made the same decision a lot of 9-year-olds made. I went to a Marine Corps recruiter. I did not go because I was brave. I did not go because I wanted to be a hero. I went because I had just watched my country get attacked. And I was 19. And I thought somebody had to do something. He lifted his hand off the notebook. And then, 20 years later, I sat in a hearing room in Minneapolis, and I listened to a sitting member of the United States Congress describe what I saw that day as, and I am quoting you exactly here, Congresswoman, some people did something. The reference was unmistakable. The audience knew exactly what he was quoting, the CAR event. March of 2019. The 6 words that had haunted Ilhan Omar for 7 years. I have the transcript right here in this notebook, ma'am. Some people did something, 6 words. That is how the woman elected to represent the people of Minneapolis described the worst extremist attack in the history of the United States. Some people did something. Vance leaned forward in his chair. Before I read a single word about the deception in this district, I am going to ask you to do one thing. One thing. I am going to ask you to look directly into that camera over there, and I am going to ask you to say the names of 3 of those Americans. Just 3. Not all 3,000. 3. He waited. And then I am going to ask you to apologize to their families. Not to me. To them. The silence in the room was the kind of silence that has weight, that presses against the eardrums. Omar tried to speak. I am not going to be lectured about. 3 names, Congresswoman, that is all. The cameras are right there. The American people are watching. She did not say a single name. She tried twice. Her mouth opened, her mouth closed. The second time she opened it, she said, "This hearing is a sham." Vance nodded slowly. He picked up his pen and made a small mark in the notebook. Thank you for that answer, ma'am. The American people just got the answer they needed. He opened the notebook to the first page. Now, let's talk about feeding our future. On January 20th, 2020, the World Health Organization confirmed the first case of COVID-19 in the United States. Within 90 days, the United States Congress had appropriated approximately $2 trillion in emergency relief. A portion of that money flowed to a federal program called the Child Nutrition Program. The purpose of that program was simple: children whose schools had closed depended on school meals. The federal government wanted to make sure those children did not go hungry. Vance looked up. Congresswoman, do you agree with that statement of fact? Of course. The Child Nutrition Program in Minnesota was administered through nonprofit sponsors. One of those sponsors was an organization called Feeding Our Future, founded in 2016. In 2019, before the pandemic, Feeding Our Future received approximately $3.4 million in federal funding. That is a small organization, the kind of group that operates out of a converted church basement and serves a few hundred families. He turned the page. By 2021, 18 months later, Feeding Our Future was receiving nearly $200 million in federal funding, from $3 million to $200 million in 18 months. A 60-fold increase. Ma'am, did you find that suspicious at any point? Omar opened her mouth. Vance held up one finger, the smallest gesture. I am not finished, Congresswoman. I will let you respond, but I am not finished. She closed her mouth. The federal investigation that followed has now produced 78 indictments, 57 convictions. The Raimi Bach was found guilty by a jury of wire deception and multiple federal infractions. The Attorney General of the United States described it as the largest pandemic relief scheme in American history. The current director of the FBI described it as, and I am quoting now, the tip of a very large iceberg. End quote. He looked up from the notebook. And now I want everyone in this room to understand what those numbers actually mean. Because $250 million is just a number. It does not hurt. It does not cry. It does not go to bed hungry. He set the notebook down flat. This organization claimed to serve 125 million meals to children. Most of those meals never existed. The children on the rosters never existed. The names were made up. The ages were made up. The birthdays were made up. While real children right here in Minneapolis, in this city, in your district, Congresswoman, stood in real food lines with their real parents. His voice did not rise, it got quieter. The money that was misappropriated was used to buy a $2 million mansion in Minneapolis. It was used to buy luxury cars. It was used for shopping sprees at Nordstrom. It was used to purchase real estate in Turkey and Kenya. Every single dollar that bought a watch came from the pocket of a child who needed a sandwich. The room was completely still. Vance picked up the notebook again. Now, ma'am, I want to be very clear about something before I continue. I am not, I repeat not, accusing you of personally taking money. I want to say that twice so the record is clean. I am not accusing you of taking 1 penny. The Department of Justice has not charged you with any infraction. I am not the Department of Justice. I am the Vice President of the United States. But I am going to ask you a series of questions. They are simple questions. They are yes or no questions. And the people of Minneapolis, your constituents, the parents of those children deserve to hear your answers. He turned the page. Question 1. Did you, in your official capacity as a member of Congress, appear in a promotional video produced by Feeding Our Future? I appear in many community videos. Yes or no, ma'am? Yes. Question 2. Was Ali Issa, the Deputy District Director of your congressional office, an active advocate on behalf of Feeding Our Future to state officials in Minnesota? Mr. Issa acted in his personal capacity. Ma'am, yes or no? Yes. Question 3. Did Guhad Hashi Said, a man who served as an official of your congressional campaign, plead guilty in federal court to running a fraudulent food site as part of this scheme? Silence. Congresswoman? Yes. Question 4. On the night you won your 2018 congressional election, did you celebrate at a restaurant called Safari, whose co-owner Salim Saeed has since been convicted of his role in the Feeding Our Future deception and is currently serving time in federal prison? Omar's voice was almost too quiet to hear. Yes. Question 5. Did you accept campaign donations from individuals later indicted in this scheme? Those donations were returned. Were they returned before the FBI raid in January of 2022 or after? Omar did not answer. Ma'am? After. Vance let that word hang in the air for 10 full seconds, long enough for everyone in the room to feel its weight. Then he looked at the notebook one more time and read aloud. December of 2025. Congresswoman, you appeared on the CBS program Face the Nation. The host, Margaret Brennan, asked you whether you had any regrets about your support for the Meals Act, the legislation that critics say weakened the oversight that allowed this deception to occur. You said, and I am quoting you directly, I have absolutely no regrets. You said, and I quote again, it did help feed kids. He set the notebook down. No regrets, Congresswoman? His voice was barely above a whisper. Tell that to the children who never got the meals. A man stood up in the gallery. He was middle-aged, bearded, wearing a work jacket. His skin was dark. When he spoke, his accent was Somali. Mr. Vice President, May I speak? The chairman picked up his gavel. The gallery does not have speaking privileges in this hearing. Mr. Chairman, it was Vance. Quiet, polite. I would consider it a personal favor if you would allow this gentleman to speak. He is a constituent. We are in a field hearing in his neighborhood. I would like to hear him. The chairman looked at the man, then at Vance. He set the gavel down. The gentleman in the third row will identify himself for the record. The man straightened his shoulders. My name is Abdirahman Yusuf. I came to the United States from Somalia in 1998. I am a citizen of this country. I work as a mechanic. I have 4 children. My oldest son is 15 years old. His name is Mohammed. He is autistic. The room had gone very still. In 2021, my wife and I were told there was a program in Minnesota that would provide therapy for children like our son. We were told we could enroll him. We were told the federal government would pay for it because he qualified. We signed the papers. We waited. We waited for someone to call us about an appointment. Abdirahman's voice did not break, but it was tight, the voice of a man who had practiced not breaking. Nobody ever called. Not once. Not in 4 years. We called the number on the form. The number was disconnected. We drove to the address. The address was an empty office. Last year, we found out that the company that was supposed to help our son had been part of one of these deception schemes. The owners are now in federal court. My son is 15 years old. He has never had 1 hour of the therapy that the federal government paid for him to have. Not 1 hour. He turned to face Ilhan Omar, Congresswoman Omar. She did not answer. You are my representative. You have been my representative for 6 years. In those 6 years, you have spent a lot of time on television, telling people that anyone who criticizes this scheme is biased. You have said they hate Somalis. You have said they are Islamophobic. You have said they are xenophobic. He took a breath. Madam, I am Somali. I am Muslim. I came to this country the same way you did. The people who took this money, they did not take it from white people in the suburbs. They took it from my children. They took it from our children. They kept the food from babies who looked like my babies. They kept the therapy from boys who looked like my boy. And every time someone tries to ask a question about it, you say they are attacking us. His voice rose for the first time. You are not protecting us. You are protecting them. And we are tired of it. He sat down. The room exploded. Not in applause, not in shouting, in a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a cheer, the sound of a community recognizing that one of its own had finally said what they had all been thinking. The chairman gavelled for order. It took a full minute. In the witness chair, Ilhan Omar's hands had begun to tremble. She gathered herself. 6 years of cable news training kicked in. She squared her shoulders. She raised her chin. She looked into the cameras, not at Vance, not at Abdirahman, but at the cameras. And she pulled the only card she had left. This is exactly what I was talking about. A white man, a white Marine, comes to my district, brings a tame community member to attack me, and tries to dress up old prejudiced tropes in the language of accountability. This is colonial. This is misogynistic. This is Islamophobic. This is the same script that has been used against black Muslim women in this country since. Ma'am, Vance's voice cut through it, not loud, just final. I am going to stop you right there. She kept going. You don't get to silence a black woman in. Ma'am. Something in his voice made her stop. He was not looking at her anymore. He was looking at Abdirahman Yusuf. Sir, would you stand up one more time, please? Abdirahman stood. Vance turned back to Omar. His voice was still calm. But there was something in it now. Something cold and steady, like a current under ice. Congresswoman, This man is Somali. He is Muslim. He is an immigrant. He is a citizen. He is your constituent. He is everything you have spent your career claiming to represent. He just stood up in this room and told me that the people who took this money kept it from his autistic son. He said it on the public record, in front of cameras, in front of his neighbors, in front of God. Vance leaned forward. Are you going to look him in the eye, ma'am, and tell him that asking about that deception is discriminatory? Omar tried. She made it for about half a second before her eyes dropped to the table. Congresswoman? She did not speak. I will wait. She did not speak. I have all day, ma'am. I have all year. I have the rest of this administration. I am perfectly willing to sit here in silence until you can answer the question this man deserves an answer to. 20 seconds passed. 30. Finally, Omar said, I am not going to be lectured by. That is not an answer, ma'am. This is a sham hearing. That is not an answer, either. Abdirahman sat down on his own. He did not need Omar to look at him. He had said what he came to say. Vance gave him a single nod, soldier to soldier, father to father, and turned the page in his notebook. I would like to talk about money, Congresswoman. In 2018, you were elected to the United States Congress. Before that election, you had served in the Minnesota State Legislature for 2 years. Before that, you were a community organizer. You had no significant business holdings. You had no major investments. You had, by your own description in interviews and in your own memoir, lived a modest life as a refugee who had built something through hard work and public service. Is that an accurate description of your circumstances in 2018? I was a public servant. Is it accurate? Ma'am? Yes or no? Yes. 6 years later, in 2024, your most recent financial disclosure listed your household net worth at as much as $30 million. Is that accurate? The valuations of my husband's businesses. Yes or no, ma'am? Yes? Vance set the notebook down. He folded his hands on top of it. $30 million on a congressional salary of $174,000 a year in 6 years. Let me do that math out loud, because I think the people in this room deserve to hear it spelled out. If you had saved every single dollar of your congressional salary, every penny, paid no taxes, paid no rent, ate no food, owned no clothes, for 6 straight years, you would have $1,044,000. Your household reports having approximately 30 times that amount. He picked up the notebook again. I am not the Internal Revenue Service. I am not the Securities and Exchange Commission. I am not the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I am the Vice President of the United States asking you a question that every working family in this room is asking right now. How does a refugee with no business background and a congressional salary end up with $30 million in 6 years? My husband? Let us talk about your husband, ma'am. Vance read from the notebook. Your husband, Tim Minette, is a political consultant. In the year 2020, your congressional campaign paid Mr. Minette's consulting firm approximately $3 million. That is a matter of public record from FEC filings. $3 million in campaign funds from your campaign to your husband's company. That is legal. I want to be clear about that. It is legal. It is also the kind of arrangement that the working people of Minneapolis are not allowed to set up for themselves. If a plumber in street, Paul tried to pay his wife $3 million out of his business and then claim it as legitimate, the IRS would take an interest. Members of Congress have different rules. In addition to the $3 million, Mr. Minette is involved in several business ventures. There is a cannabis business that is currently the subject of a civil lawsuit alleging that $1.7 million in investor funds have, quote, gone missing. There is a winery business registered as EST Crew LLC that is also under civil suit. There is a venture capital firm called Rose Lake Capital LLC that has described itself as having, quote, global interests. The disclosures regarding these businesses have shown dramatic swings in stated valuation. Vance looked up. And there is one more thing in the public record I would like to read to you. In 2019, the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board, not a Republican talking point, the official board of the state of Minnesota, found that your campaign violated state law. They ordered you to personally repay $3,469. They found that you had used campaign funds for personal travel to Estonia. They also found that you had filed joint tax returns with a man you were not legally married to at the time. He set the notebook down. Now I want to read you something you said publicly. Congresswoman, February of 2023. 2 months after you were censured, you stood at the microphone on the floor of the United States House of Representatives, and you said the following words, and I am quoting you exactly. He read, "The Republican Party has become the party of corruption." He let the quote sit. The party of corruption, ma'am? Pause. 6 years from a refugee camp to $30 million, $3 million, from your own campaign to your own husband. Civil suits alleging missing money. A campaign official in federal prison for misconduct. Donations from individuals returned only after the FBI showed up. An official state finding of campaign finance violations. Vance leaned back in his chair. Tell me again, Congresswoman, which party is the party of corruption? Omar was breathing hard. She tried to interrupt twice. Vance let her speak both times. Both times, what came out was a string of accusations prejudiced, sexist, Islamophobic, colonial. And both times, Vance simply waited for her to finish and then continued reading from his notebook. But the third time she tried to speak, he held up a hand. Ma'am, before I continue, there is one more matter I have to address, and I take no pleasure in this one. He turned the page. In December of 2025, the United States Department of the Treasury opened an active investigation into whether funds taken from the Feeding Our Future scheme were laundered overseas and ultimately delivered to a designated foreign extremist organization called Al-Shabaab. He let the word land. For the people in this room who do not know that name, Al-Shabaab is a militant group operating out of Somalia. They are designated as a foreign extremist organization by the United States Department of State. They have claimed the lives of thousands of people. They have struck schools. They have struck hotels. They have struck UN compounds. They have specifically targeted American citizens. The Treasury Department investigation is active. I am not going to characterize the evidence because that is the Treasury Department's job and not mine. But I am going to tell you, Congresswoman, that federal investigators are now examining whether American taxpayer dollars, money that was meant to feed children in your district, was funneled to an extremist organization that has taken the lives of American citizens. In your district, ma'am, by people who appeared in promotional videos with you, by people who donated to your campaign, by people who served on the staff of your office. He turned the page. And while that investigation continues, I want to read into the record one more thing. February 24th, 2026. 2 months ago, the State of the Union address, the President of the United States was speaking to a joint session of Congress. You stood up on the floor of the House of Representatives, and you screamed 2 words that the cameras caught and the entire country heard. You called the President of the United States, and I quote, a destroyer. You called him, and I quote, a liar. On the floor of the House of Representatives, during the State of the Union of the country that took your family out of a refugee camp in Kenya in 1995. A woman in the gallery stood up. She was white, working class, maybe 60 years old. She was wearing a denim jacket with a small pin on the lapel, a single gold star. "Mr. Vice President, may I?" Vance turned. When he saw the gold star, he stood up slowly out of respect. He nodded once. "Ma'am." The woman did not look at Vance. She looked at Omar. "My name is Patricia Donnelly. I live in Bloomington. My son, his name was Sergeant Michael Donnelly, United States Marine Corps. He was 22 years old when he fell in Helmand Province in 2011. He took the same oath the Vice President just talked about. He gave everything for the same country." She paused. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was not. "Congresswoman Omar, 2 months ago, you stood up at the State of the Union address. You stood up in the chamber of the United States Congress in front of the entire country, and you screamed at the President of the United States. You called him a destroyer. You called him a liar. You did it on the floor of the House of Representatives during the State of the Union of the country my son sacrificed his life for." The chairman was not gaveling. Nobody was moving. "I am 63 years old. I do not have a college degree. I am not as smart as you. I am not as well-spoken as you. I have never been on television. But I want you to hear me say this. And I want every camera in this room to record it, because I am only going to say it once." She drew herself up. "When you screamed at that president from that floor, you disgraced my son's grave. You disgraced every grave at Arlington. You disgraced every Marine who took an oath and meant it. And I will go to my own grave never forgiving you for that. Never." She sat down. The silence in the room was something physical, something with weight. In the witness chair, Ilhan Omar had begun to cry. Not loudly, not for the cameras. The silent kind of crying that happens when a person realizes she is alone in a room of 200 people, and not one of them is on her side. Vance let the silence sit for a long time before he spoke again. When he did, his voice was almost gentle. "Congresswoman, I have one more thing to read, and what I am about to read is the most serious accusation a vice president can make against a sitting member of Congress. So, I am going to be very precise about what I say. I am not going to make any allegation today that I cannot back up with public records." He turned the page. "The following are facts. They are not opinions. They are not allegations. They are documented in court filings, in your own statements, and in news reporting from credible mainstream outlets in your home state. In 2002, you participated in a religious marriage ceremony with a man named Ahmed Hirsi. That marriage was an Islamic ceremony. It was not registered with any civil authority. You and Mr. Hirsi had 3 children together over the following years. You lived together as a family. In 2009, while you were still in that religious marriage and still living with Mr. Hirsi and still raising children with Mr. Hirsi, you legally married a different man. His name was Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi. He was a British citizen. In 2017, you legally divorced Mr. Elmi. In 2018, 1 month after the legal divorce from Mr. Elmi, you legally married Mr. Hirsi, the man you had been living with the entire time. He looked up. Those are the facts. They are not in dispute. They come from court records and from your own published statements. Now I am going to tell you what those facts mean under United States law and under the laws of the state of Minnesota. For the 8 years between 2009 and 2017, you were legally married to one man and religiously married to another. You were living with the second man. You were raising children with the second man. And according to the official 2019 finding of the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board, not my finding, the Board's finding, you filed joint tax returns during that period with a man you were not legally married to, Filing joint tax returns with someone who is not your legal spouse, ma-am, is tax manipulation. It is a federal infraction. The Minnesota Campaign Finance Board found this in 2019 and ordered you to personally repay funds. That is on the public record. Living in a marriage with two men at the same time, ma-am, is polygamy. Polygamy is a state infraction in Minnesota. It is a federal disqualification for naturalized citizenship if it occurred at the time of naturalization or shortly after. He paused. Those documented facts alone are sufficient to warrant a federal investigation. But there is more, Congresswoman, and I am going to read this part very carefully because I do not want to overstate it. Members of the Somali community in Minneapolis, including a community leader named Abdi Hakim Osman, who has put his name on the public record, have publicly stated that the man you legally married in 2009, Mr. Elmi, was your brother. They have stated that you introduced him to the community as your brother from London who needed papers. An Instagram photograph existed and was subsequently deleted, showing Mr. Elmi holding your newborn daughter in 2012 with text identifying the child as his niece. That word, ma-am, has a specific meaning. A man's niece is the daughter of his sister or his brother, not his ex-wife. Hosts on Somali community discussion forums identifying Mr. Elmi as your brother were also deleted. I am not today asserting that those community members are correct. I am not today asserting that Mr. Elmi was your brother. I am asking the documented questions. First, the brother question can wait, the polygamy question cannot. Vance set the notebook down. For the first time, he placed both palms flat on the table. What I am asserting today, Congresswoman, is the following: the documented facts. The polygamy, the tax manipulation, the timeline, the official finding of the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board. Those facts alone are sufficient to require a serious federal investigation into whether your United States citizenship and your eligibility to serve in Congress were obtained through deception and misconduct. And if that investigation finds what the documented record already suggests, then the consequences include, under federal law, marriage manipulation charges, immigration misconduct charges, tax deception charges, denaturalization, and deportation. He let those last words sit. He picked up the notebook one final time. Congresswoman, I have one more thing to read. This is not from a federal indictment. This is not from a court record. This is from a video on your own official Congressional website. The video is dated January 18, 2019. It is the video of you taking the oath of office for the United States House of Representatives. You raised your right hand, you placed your other hand on a Quran, and you said the following words. I am quoting you exactly. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So help me God. He set the notebook down, without any mental reservation, without any purpose of evasion. Those are the words you spoke, Congresswoman. They are your words. I am only repeating them. He looked at her directly. Did you mean those words when you said them? Silence. Did you take that oath without mental reservation, without purpose of evasion? Silence. Or were you? Even as you raised your hand on that Quran, calculating what this country could give you, calculating what your friends and your campaign officials could take from the hungry children of this district, calculating how you could turn a refugee story into a $30 million net worth? He paused. Congresswoman, 1 hour ago you stood at this microphone and you said something I want to read back to you. You said, and I am quoting from my notes here, I owe this country nothing. Those were your words, I have them right here. He tapped the page. I want to tell you what this country gave you, ma'am. His voice did not rise, it got quieter. It gave you a home when your home was engulfed. It gave you food when you were hungry. It gave you school when you could not read English. It gave you safety when your country was at war with itself. It gave you the right to vote. It gave you the right to run for office. It gave you the right to stand at this microphone and call it a sham. In return, you may have fabricated the very paperwork that made you American. You may have stood by while your friends withheld food from hungry children. You may have laundered money to an extremist organization in the country you came from. You may have screamed at a sitting president from the floor of the House. And then you stood at that microphone today and you told the world you owe this country nothing. Pause. There are millions of immigrants in this country, Congresswoman. Most of them are honest. Most of them are grateful. Most of them would forfeit their lives before they would do what you may have done. They get up every morning, they go to work, they raise their children, they obey the law, they take the oath, and they mean it. They are watching this hearing right now. Ma'am. And they are not on your side. Vance closed the leather notebook. He did not say another word. In the witness chair, Ilhan Omar's hands were shaking visibly. She tried to gather her papers. They slipped through her fingers. She tried again. Her water glass, full, untouched, slipped from her fingers, fell off the edge of the table, and shattered on the marble floor of the federal courthouse. The sound of breaking glass was the loudest thing in the room. 2 security officers moved toward her instinctively. She waved them off. She tried to stand, her legs failed her on the first attempt, and she sat back down hard. She tried again and made it upright on the second try. She reached for her chief of staff. Her chief of staff was looking at the table. She looked toward her 2 Democratic colleagues at the committee table. Both of them were studying their phones with sudden, intense fascination. She tried to speak. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Finally, she said in a voice that nobody who had ever watched her on cable news would have recognized, I have nothing to say at this time. She gathered what was left of her dignity, and she walked toward the side door. The walk was 40 feet. Every camera in the room tracked her. She passed the gallery. She did not look at Abdirahman Yusuf. She did not look at Patricia Donnelly. She did not look at the rows of working people who were her constituents. She kept her eyes on the door. In the corridor outside, the press was waiting. Congresswoman, do you deny the polygamy allegations? Congresswoman, was Mr. Elmi your brother? Congresswoman, will you cooperate with the Treasury Department investigation? A young reporter from Minnesota Public Radio, a woman who had covered Omar respectfully for 6 years, stepped forward and asked quietly, Ilhan, will you address what the vice president said in there? The use of her first name was the worst part. Worse than the cameras. Worse than the questions. Omar said, I have no comment at this time. She got into her car. The car drove away. Her phone began to ring before the car left the parking lot. She looked at the screen. The names were people she had served with for years, donors, colleagues, her own staff. She did not need to answer to know what they were calling about. She turned the phone off and laid it face down on the leather seat beside her. She watched the city of Minneapolis slide past the window. She did not cry because there was no one in the car to see her cry, and the driver would not say a word about it ever. And that somehow was the worst part of all. The story was on every cable network within 90 minutes. Fox News ran a banner. Vance exposes Omar. Treasury investigation confirmed. Newsmax played the Patricia Donnelly clip on a loop with the Chiron Marine mother destroys Omar. CNN spent 35 minutes in an internal editorial meeting trying to decide how to frame the story before settling on heated Minneapolis hearing raises new questions. MSNBC tried to lead with Omar's claim that the hearing was a political attack. The segment was mocked online within 11 minutes by the second hour. MSNBC had quietly updated its coverage to include the Abdirahman Yusuf clip. On social media, the response was an earthquake. The hashtag number #OathBroken hit #1 within 90 minutes. The clip of Patricia Donnelly, 63 years old, gold star pin on her denim jacket, telling Ilhan Omar that she had disgraced her son's grave, was shared 64 million times in the first 24 hours. The clip of Abdirahman Yusuf telling Omar to stop using his community's pain to protect her friends was translated into unsprezeche languages. A billboard appeared in downtown Minneapolis within 72 hours, showing his face and the words, "Stop using us." But the clip that went the most viral, the one that grandmothers in Alabama texted to their sisters in Tennessee, the one that construction workers in Ohio played on their lunch breaks, the one that veterans in every state shared with the caption, "Finally," was none of those. It was the moment Vance asked Omar to say 3 names of September, the 11th victims, and the silence that followed. That clip was viewed 87 million times in 48 hours. By that evening, 3 things had happened that would define the next stage of Ilhan Omar's career. First, the United States House Ethics Committee announced an immediate investigation into the documented findings Vance had presented from the leather notebook. The investigation had bipartisan support, including from 2 Democratic members who had, until that morning, been considered Omar's allies. Second, the Speaker of the House announced that he would move to strip Omar of her remaining committee assignments pending the outcome of the ethics investigation. 3 Democratic members of the House released carefully worded statements suggesting that Omar should, quote, address the documented record in the public interest, end quote. Third, a Somali-American businessman in Minnesota's 5th Congressional District announced his primary challenge against Omar from the courthouse steps in downtown Minneapolis. He stood in front of a crowd of 300 people. Most of them were Somali. Most of them were holding signs that read, "Stop using us." He gave his speech in English first and Somali second. A senior Democratic official, speaking on background to a reporter from Politico, was quoted in the next morning's edition saying, "She's done. We all know it. The party has been protecting her for 6 years after today. The protection is over." The Department of Justice issued a brief statement at 6:00 p.m. Eastern saying only that the documented record presented at the Minneapolis field hearing was, quote, under active and ongoing review by federal investigators, end quote. The Treasury Department issued no statement at all. They didn't need to. They had been investigating since December. In a quiet corridor outside the federal courthouse in Minneapolis, after most of the press had left, and the gallery had emptied, and the chairman had recessed the hearing into the next day, Vice President JD Vance was walking toward his car when a man stepped out of a doorway. It was Abdirahman Yusuf. Vance stopped. He set the leather notebook down on a bench and extended his hand. "Sir." "Mr. Vice President." The 2 men shook hands. Abdirahman did not let go right away. "I want to thank you for letting me speak in there. I have lived in this country for almost 30 years. Nobody has ever asked me what I thought before. Today was the first time." Vance nodded slowly. "You said it better than I could have, sir. Better than anyone could have. The country owes you a thank you, not the other way around. Mr. Vice President, may I ask you a question?" "Of course." "My son, Mohammed, is he going to get the help he was supposed to get?" Vance was quiet for a moment. He looked at the older man, at the work jacket, at the lined hands of a mechanic, at the eyes of a father who had spent 4 years waiting for a phone call that never came. "Sir, I want to make you a promise. I do not make promises lightly. I am going to walk into the Department of Health and Human Services tomorrow morning and I am going to give your son's name to the secretary personally. He is going to get the therapy he was supposed to get, not as charity, as a debt this country owes him. Do you understand me, sir? Abdirahman nodded. He could not speak for a moment. Mr. Vice President, are you a man of God? Vance considered the question carefully before he answered. I try to be, sir. I do not always succeed, but I try. Then God bless you. And God bless the country that gave you the courage to do what you did today. The two men shook hands one more time. Abdirahman walked back into the courthouse to find his car. Vance picked up the leather notebook from the bench and walked out into the cold Minneapolis afternoon. He did not whistle. He did not smile. He did not speak to the agents who fell into step beside him. He simply walked. 6 hours later, the Vice President of the United States was sitting at his desk in the West Wing of the White House. The leather notebook was open in front of him. On the last page, beneath the notes about Ilhan Omar, the dates, the timelines, the dollar amounts, the names, there was a single sentence written in his own handwriting. He had written it years earlier when he was still a junior senator from Ohio on the night before his first major committee vote. He had written it so that he would never forget it. The sentence read, "Remember why you took the oath." Vance read the sentence one time. He closed the notebook, he placed it in the bottom drawer of his desk, and locked the drawer. Then he sat for a moment in the silence of his office and looked out the window at the Washington Monument, lit gold against the dark winter sky. He picked up the phone on his desk and dialed his wife. Hey, it's me. Pause. Yeah, it went okay. Pause. No, I do not want to talk about it. Not tonight. I just want to come home. Pause. I love you too. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up the phone. He stood up. He buttoned his suit jacket. He turned off the desk lamp. In the dark of the office, before he walked out into the corridor and the cars and the long ride home, J.D. Vance, Marine, lawyer, author, husband, father, Vice President of the United States, bowed his head for one moment of silence, not for himself, for 3,000 Americans who passed away on a September morning 25 years ago, and for a 5-year-old boy in Minneapolis named Mohammed, who had been waiting 4 years for a phone call. Then he walked out of the office and went home to his family. When the dust settles and the cameras finally turn away, who truly pays the price when those in power forget the very oath they swore to protect us?